Hello and welcome to helpyourmath.com. In this video on the truth in lending, we're going to talk about calculating unearned interest. First, let's talk about what is unearned interest. Well, unearned interest is if you decide to pay off a loan before the agreed upon time, you may be faced with something called unearned interest. A company is required to show the method for calculating this refund or reduction of the finance charge, and it must be disclosed at the time the loan is initiated. The lender can impose an early payment penalty to recover certain costs. Although since 2009, since the market crash, a lot of companies have done away with an early payment penalty because they're just happy to get the money back at all. Let's talk about one way to calculate unearned interest, which is the actuarial method. And what this means is there's a closed-end loan, which means you agreed with the seller of a certain amount of time in which you'll pay it back. So maybe you said you're going to pay it back in 5 years, but then something happens and you actually can pay it off a little bit earlier. So maybe you pay it off in 4 years instead. We're going to calculate the unearned interest based on that. We're going to let capital letter R equal the regular monthly payment, lowercase k represent the remaining number of scheduled payments after the current payment, and H is that finance charge per $100 corresponding to a loan with the same APR and K monthly payments. So we saw this in the previous section, calculating that H value, only this time we have to figure out what the H value is. So we're kind of using the same table, but using it backwards. Okay, so then the unearned interest U is given by U is equal to K times R, so the number of scheduled payments times the regular monthly payment, times H divided by 100 plus H. So it's like the finance charge per $100, and then that $100 plus the finance charge in the denominator. Okay, the other thing that we're curious about is the payoff amount. So if you do take out a 5-year loan and you pay it back in 4 years instead, you have to pay back a lot more for that last payment, right? Because you're paying for the entire next year. A closed-end loan requiring monthly payments can be paid off early along with the current payment. The payoff amount excluding any prepayment penalty is given by, so we have K plus 1, so this K was the number of payments remaining, and this is the current payment, so that's why there's that plus 1, times the amount in which you have agreed to pay, that regular monthly payment, minus that unearned interest. So you don't have to pay interest because you're not keeping that money, or you're not borrowing that money for that additional year. So this is called the payoff amount. We look at how much you're going to pay in that one big payment, and then subtract off the unearned interest. Let's look at an example. You use your tax return to pay off your student loans at the end of 4 years instead of 5 years as originally agreed. Your regular monthly payments are $212 with an APR of 8.5%. First, we're going to calculate the unearned interest, then the payoff amount. So let's label all of the things that we see here. First, let's write down the formulas that we're going to need. So we have our unearned interest is determined by K times R times H over 100 plus H. And then we have the payoff amount. So this is the amount you have to pay. That's going to be K plus 1 times R minus that unearned interest. Okay, so what is K? You're going to pay it back at the end of 4 years instead of 5 years. So that would be 60 minus 48. K is 12. R is the regular monthly payment. You're paying $212. H we need to figure out, so we're going to figure out H based on the APR of 8.5% and the fact that how many months are we not paying as a result of this? Well, it'd be 12, so we're going to use that K value of 12. So we're going to look at the table to figure out the H value, because that's what we need for this formula, based on an 8.5% APR for 12 months. So here's the table, here's 12 months, right here. And it was an APR of 8.5%, so we're looking here, and where do these intersect? An H value of 4.66. So that's the H value that we're going to use here, 4.66. Now we're ready to calculate the unearned interest. So the unearned interest is K12 times those monthly payments times H divided by 100 plus H, which I'm going to go ahead and just add those because it's a pretty nice addition problem. I suggest you do the same because when you type this in your calculator, if you don't put the denominator in parentheses, it's going to follow order of operations and it's going to be a huge mess. So add that denominator first, so that way you don't have to worry about order of operations. Okay, and when I do this calculation, we're going to round to the nearest penny, and I get that we are saving $113.27. So that's money that's in your pocket that you would have paid if you waited to pay off your loan for that 5th year, but instead, because you're paying it off early, that's your savings right there. All right, so this was A. We calculated the unearned interest, $113.27. How about the payoff amount? So the payoff amount, we need K plus 1, right, because this is the number of payments that you're paying off early, plus the current payment, 1, times the payment amount, $212, minus the unearned interest of $113.27. And it looks like when it's all said and done, that one big check so that you can end your student loans is going to be for $2,642.73. And think of how good that's going to feel to cut that check and be done with paying off your loans. So this was one example. We're going to do one more example. Let's talk about Janet. And as always, I encourage you to pause the video, try this on your own, and see if you and I agree on what Janet's unearned interest is and the payoff amount. Okay, so I'm going to write those formulas just because I always find it helpful to just have them right there. So we have unearned interest is the number of payments that we're paying off times the amount of the monthly payment times H over 100 plus H. And then the payoff amount, so the check she's going to have to cut if she's paying this back early, the payoff amount is going to be the number of payments plus the current payment times the agreed upon amount of monthly payments minus the unearned interest. Okay, let's find our variables. So what's going on here? She agreed to a 48-month payment plan, but she's paying it back in 30. So in this case, K is going to be 48 minus 30, which is 18. Her regular monthly payments are $180. And now we need to figure out the H value. So the H value is going to be on that table 12.5% APR for our K value 18 months. So we're going to look at that and we're going to figure out our H value based on those two criteria. 12.5% is over here and 18 months is right here. And what do we see for the 18 months at 12.5%? 10.19. So our H value is 10.19. Now I think we have all the necessary information to calculate the unearned interest for Janet and the payoff amount. The unearned interest is going to be calculated by doing 18 times 180 times 10.19 over, and again I'm going to go ahead and add this because it's just adding 100 and 1019, which will be 110.19, and we're going to round to the nearest penny. And when I do that, I end up with $299.62. So this is interest that she would have paid in those final 18 months, but because she's paying it back early, this is now money in her pocket that she's not going to be paying back to the bank. And what's her payoff amount? The payoff amount is going to be calculated by doing the number of payments that she needs to make. So 18, because those are the ones that she's paying off early, plus the current payment times the monthly payments minus the unearned interest. And so she's going to need to cut a check for $3,120.38. So that's what she's going to pay it off early, 18 months early. This is how much she's saving by doing that. These have been examples of calculating unearned interest based on the actuarial method. Thank you for stopping.